Welcome back, everyone. Greg Essenmacher, but you know me. You don't want to learn about me, but you do want to learn about my guest, that's for sure. And it's Dr. Brett Gilbert. So, who is he, might you say? Well, you probably know him. If not, he graduated from the University of Maryland Dental School, go Terps, DDS in 2001, Endo in 2003. And, I just have to say, Brett, I think this is episode 80 something, you may be the first endodontist I actually have on the show. So,
Wow.
welcome. I'm busting my cherry out with you. So he's a professor in the Department of Endo at the University of Illinois at Chicago, a diplomate of the American Board of Endodontics, founder of Access Endo. That's Access Endo for all of you who want me to spell it out, a global education platform, and the Access Endo Impact Academy. Now, I bet you can't say that 3 times really fast, even when you're sober, can you? Come on now, Brett. Be honest. He's a fellow of the International College of Dentists and a contributing consultant for Oral Health Journal. Dr. Gilbert lectures nationally and internationally on clinical endodontics and wellness. He's a partner in Specialized Dental Partners since 2020. I want to hear about that. Dr. Gilbert is a host of the On The Cusp podcast, and we're going to learn about the inception of that. He has a private practice, King Endodontics PLLC, limited to endodontics in Niles, Illinois. Welcome to the program, Dr. Brett.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you for the warm welcome. And I'm honored to be the first endodontist and ready to mix it up with you a bit.
How about that? How about that, right? You got a guy from Full Arch that likes to take them out and slam in some implants. I mean, I'm not a doctor, right? I just help them to do it. And somebody who likes to do that really fine tooth with all of those files and put in so we'll have some good conversation. No, I appreciate you being on the show. And so we have a mutual friend, Brandy Molitor, who put us into contact with each other. Just love her to death. She's a fellow Michigander now. I know she's not originally from there. So Midwest is best, even though I live in Phoenix and have since 99. So thanks so much for coming on the program. There's so much that I want to talk to you about, between, what you do with the Implant Academy and the teaching and education, which I think is so critically important. But, the On The Cusp podcast and the inception of that. But let's go back a little bit further than that. I want to hear about where your interest in dentistry began. So what's your origin story? Let's start there.
Yeah, so I'm the son of a dentist, so I know that shouldn't be a huge surprise. It is generational in many ways, but it's interesting. Very recently, it came up. I had this really deep early memory. Someone was asking me what DDS stands for, and I had this just deep memory that came up of seeing my dad sign his name DDS and going to his office and seeing on the door DDS and saying, "Hey, Dad, what's DDS?" And he's like, "Well, it's Doctor of Dental Surgery." And I remember thinking, wow, like my dad's a doctor of dental surgery. That just sounded really important and it impressed me. And it seemed like something that was very noble in my young mind. And the truth is, Greg, I don't ever remember considering, thinking about, or desiring to go into any other profession or job or anything. It was always dentistry. I grew up in the dental office. My dad did kind of sell it subconsciously and consciously to me. He did have a lot of freedom in his life. He talked about being his own boss. He talked about helping and serving other people. And so basically, my whole life was about becoming a dentist. And so that trajectory was always very clear, for better or for worse. But the origin story starts really young and with a great inspiration in my dad.
Fantastic. And was he a general dentist or did he specialize as well?
General dentist. And the vision that I always held was that I would become a dentist and join my dad in practice. And somewhere along the road, the idea of specialization came into play. And I realized that I probably was more of a personality where I would rather be an expert in one area than a jack of all trades in all. And my dad was actually very much the jack of all trades personality, and he mastered that. But that was where we started having discussions about, hey, maybe dentistry is the right route, but maybe not practicing with dad. And so my dad sent me to all of his specialist friends. I went to ortho, didn't really feel that, went to perio, considered that actually quite heavily. Oral surgery felt like way too much time. But man, when I went to that endodontist office, Barry Juris, rest in peace, he knocked my socks off, looking through a microscope, using rotary instruments, showing me videos of his surgeries, his passion for what he was doing. And I walked out of his office and I said, I want to be an endodontist.
Nice. And I love that your dad, helped you to really figure out what the path was by sharing all of his connections in the industry. But what a great level of self-awareness for you to understand what matched your personality better, right? So as you describe it, the jack of all trades that your dad was, and for yourself to be, I'm kind of more like I want to go a mile deep, not so much a mile wide, and stay in the field for sure, but at least understanding that. And that level of self-awareness, definitely something that we talk about a lot on the Two Sleuth podcast, of understanding self and having self-awareness, and then finding your passion and then running with it, even if it's not what you started. But it sounded like you kind of started there from the very beginning, and I love that. And so tell me a little bit more about then how your evolution from dental school, which was, in the early 2000s, and then the specialization, which that was 20 years ago. And certainly the landscape is vastly different today. But then where you started your career then in the greater Chicago area, I'm
Yeah.
assuming that's where Niles, Illinois is.
Yep. Yeah. So I
Did I
graduated
say Illinois? Wait, did I say Illinois? Illinois.
we get it all. We get Illinois. It's all good. Very interesting state name. But I graduated from I graduated from dental school in 2001, was blessed to be accepted into the University of Maryland Endo program right out of dental school, which was at that time really unexpected in a lot of ways. Graduated there in '03 and went to my graduation party, packed up my car and moved to Chicago. My heart was in Chicago. My sister had lived here for a long time. I would always visit. I just felt at home here. And I moved and I just picked up everything and left. And I've been in Chicago ever since. I started to get affiliated with the University of Illinois Chicago almost immediately. And I started teaching there just maybe 6 months after I had arrived here in Chicago. But it's been an amazing journey. Yeah, Endo's changed a ton. And, from a concept standpoint, armamentarium standpoint, all the technology is just mind blowing. And I've really been grateful that I've had an opportunity to be at the forefront of all of that. And, I've been teaching for my entire career. I'm always learning. I'm a lifelong learner. I mean, I love to learn. I love to try to incorporate new things. And I also like to take on things that maybe are a little risky for the sake of someone's got to pick up the ball and run with it. And so I've had a really fulfilling career in endo in terms of practice, in terms of teaching, in terms of technology, interacting with the commercial entities. So it's been really a full range. And I'm just really blessed, quite honestly, Greg, because I do feel passionate about it. But what I love what you said was about the self-awareness. And the Two Sleuth being a representation of that, because that's very similar to what my podcast is about. It's about, it's not even just being aware of yourself, but learning to really love yourself and to recognize the things that light you up now. Like here, it's 2024. I graduated in 2003. I couldn't possibly be the same person I was then. So to me, and where I think there's a great alignment between what you're trying to do with the Two Sleuth and with what I'm trying to do is let's embrace who we are and let's take up more of what lights us up. And even if dentistry isn't the thing that's necessarily lighting up your world every minute, it looks a lot different through the lens of feeding yourself the things that do and combining all of that into a more kind of broad scale, wide ranging life. So I know it's a wide ranging answer, but I wanted to tie the two together because, yeah, it's been a great ride in endo and I'm so blessed, but so many other things outside of endo really light my fire. And I find that the more I mix them together, the more things start to come to life in a joyous way.
Yeah, and there are so many that start out in clinical, right? And then they want to transition into something else. And whether that's through side gigs, I think of my good friend Laura Brenner through Lola Bees that really assists people in that transition and what it looks like, or if it's just whole scale, sell the practice and whatever the case may look like and go completely out of dental, or those that really transition into morphing into roles that are more like executive leadership roles, into group practice, but stay in and keep their hands, but not so much into a wet-handed dentistry. There's those of us that come from the manufacturing side that transition into entrepreneurship, which, I'm one of those. And, 3 years in, and boy, oh boy, let me tell you, there's a whole lot to that, right? Which is this ever learning. And you referenced that before about, I call it being a student of the game, in the game of life, right? Because it feels to me like it is a game. If you're ever learning, it becomes gamified. Like everything can be gamified, right? And if it excites you and continues to keep you engaged, because that's really where we see so much so in the industry. And I've had guests on recently that we've really shared a lot on this, where it saddens me to see that so many individuals don't see the way out, right? They just become so burdened by fill in the blank. And especially in my lane, in the fixed full arch, all on four, teeth in a day, whatever you want to call it, that it is this uber competitive, like, got to get to the top. How many arches did you do? And competing with the fill in the blank and going that all in piece. And it's more of that, let's be super competitive, but how you can still be compassionate. Like, why are you in it and not really finding that heart space, right? That heart space to be able to do why a lot of people get involved in that area and that lane. And then just seeing no way out, right? A prosthodontist that I know that got involved with it and just couldn't figure out the way forward, and the burdens of fill in the blank that really just hampered. And I mean, I think of last I saw that, in the dental space, that it's the third highest profession of suicide. It is overwhelmingly just burdensome for the industry. And it's not just that piece, right? There is this sense of, let's just not talk about it. And I just think, rip off the Band-Aid and talk about it. I mean, if I'm not having a good day, if I'm struggled with, if I'm challenged with, like, that open authenticity in our space just needs to be ripped wide open. Are you finding that?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's really what my podcast is about. On the Cusp is, these journeys of people. And to your point, I've had dentists that have completely sold their practices, and some of them become coaches to help other dentists. How beautiful. I've had others that, have tried to add more. I'm not feeling fulfilled by this. Let me add more procedures, more technology. But to your point, the biggest issue we have, and this is when I talk about the changes in me in 20 years, is that, yeah, I love endo and I'm passionate about it, but I'm way more passionate about helping the human being inside the scrubs, inside the white coat, and quite honestly, Greg, inside the gilded cage. Because what happens in dentistry is there are so many stressors coming at us from every angle all day, every day, that we don't even see anymore. They just become common. And so we're constantly under this barrage of stress. On top of it, we have to trade our time for money. And as we build a lifestyle and our families get used to it and we like the things we like, we find that where we desperately want to get away from the chair, life keeps pushing us toward it and stuck at it. So there's this sense of being trapped. There's a sense of not being able to get out. And yeah, the suicide rates, sadly, are reflective of this. But the honest truth is, where the underreporting comes in is the depression and anxiety, because we suffer in silence. And you want to know why? Because depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, they're bad for business, right? They're bad for your reputation. They're bad for how you conduct your practice. So my passion, and you did say, I just want to say for anyone listening, you're like, I thought this guy's an endodontist. Why does he have the Access Endo Implant Academy? But it's actually the Impact Academy. So my Access Endo Impact Academy is about merging development of your clinical skills and understanding with personal growth, development, self-care, and the banner wellness. But the idea that we need to nurture ourselves, we need to see ourselves as human, we need to accept ourselves as human, and ultimately, the best doctor is not the one that went to the best school. It's not the one that has done the most CE. The best doctor is the one that walks into the operatory healthy, meaning that they're investing in their emotions. They're investing in their emotional intelligence, in their well-being, in their self-care, so that when a healthy doctor walks in an operatory, there is no doubt in my mind the best possible treatment scenario is rendered. But unfortunately, many of us don't know this. So we carry our burdens, our traumas, we carry all of our sadness and anxiety into that room with us, but it's all hidden behind a big smile. And the smiles in dentistry, unfortunately, are oftentimes exactly the opposite in reality. And so you're right, Greg. We got to peel off the band aid. And my podcast has been a great opportunity to connect with like minded folks that really do this. And whether it's because they just feel passionate about it or they've been through so many episodes of burnout that it's scary, and I'm one of them. Burnout is that trap feeling where you just don't see a way out. And for some people, that way out is suicide. We just can't have that. We work too hard, invest too much time, energy, and money to get to this point. And that was sort of what I insinuated about diversifying the interests in your life, substituting lamenting and beating yourself up with activities that actually light you up. And this type of conversation is one of them for me, Greg. Like, my podcast has been a project of joy, and being on a podcast right here with you, having this discussion, knowing others might hear it and it might help them, that brings me so much joy. That counterbalances the stress.
Yeah, and like you shared, and thank you for the correction, the name, forgive me, the Access Endo Implant Academy, and what you share is that doctors being able to show up as their best selves, patient facing, really enhances the patient experience. And what we find at GNA Consult is that when we bring clients on, those that are bringing their best selves, right, the most collaborative, are the ones that can get the best results on the business side, right? Of being able to work with their teams and being able to get the best results in reducing no-show rates and improving conversion rates with their full arch patients, and having happier, healthier patients and teams. And the teams are really the most important part of the whole, the whole scale that we work with, because they have to be good leaders. And if they're not showing up as their best selves or can't get there as their best selves, they can't lead their team in that direction. Then it becomes do this rather than let's do this, right? And it's that mindset that we find, and we see it all the time with clients, and we have the whole range of clients, those that are not really in a space to be good leaders, and we work on that. My director of operations the other day said, and so is this a strategy session or a therapy session that you're working with that client? Because there are so many that are coming from a place of brokenness or challenge that is so much more than just the scope of the business and the metrics and the numbers and the training. And so I appreciate you bringing that forward, because it is so critically important to be able to talk about it, address it, and how does it affect holistically the 360 point of view in a practice, and eventually trickle down into the patient care, because ultimately that's really what we're talking about, is the care of the patients. And I think it's so critically important to have the conversations, right, and the platform. And just like you shared, with the On The Cusp podcast, same for me with the Tooth Sleuth, it has become that outlet of joy and expression of being able to have authentic conversations with other individuals in the industry, of talking about from their perspective. So the business side of dentistry, but really, what is it that moves the industry, right? In a real way, in an authentic way. And so I appreciate you bringing that forward. So I want to go back, because you were talking about education, and you referenced it, right? So what I would term, and forgive me if it sounds a little crass, the institutional side of education, being a professor at UIC, but then the other side of the education, which you referenced and you brought up, and that's really Access Endo Implant Academy. And it sounds to me, and I'd love for you to share with the listening audience more about it, that this is more of education on the side of clinicians, and you said it much more eloquently than I could, right? But really the heart-led center side of dentistry. So tell me a little bit more about that. I'd love to learn more about that.
Yeah, so the Access Endo Impact Academy is about, the tag that we use is empowered practice, inspired life. Because we are humans, we're interacting with dentistry all day long, but we're also interacting with our family, right? And we're interacting with the world. And the way that we show up is dependent on how we feel about ourselves. And because dentistry, is in essence the playground of the perfectionist, and since perfection is impossible, you have a lot of really high performing people trying to attain a goal that's not attainable. And that requires then them to feel like they should judge themselves or put themselves down or doubt themselves. So there's all these internal battles going on. But to me, I like to reimagine what education looks like because, yes, institutionally, I think what we're doing is we're hurting people because we're not really fueling, we don't give them business, we don't give them personal growth and discovery. We don't give them self-care. We just give them this perfectionistic view of performing clinical dentistry. And I like to reimagine that because I realize how important it is to first see the human and then see the powerful healer that human is in their professional setting. And that's really what it's about is I want to empower people. I want them to get the clinical skills they need, but also the humility to understand that they're just human and that there's always something to learn. So what doesn't work out is a beautiful golden nugget, a foundation of learning so that you get better the next time. But what we have to really work away from is perfectionism, judgment, and self-doubt. And so I always say, what's the good of making this great living in dentistry, going into work, doing a million things for everyone else, and then you show back up at home, the most important place with the most important people, and you've got nothing left. And the problem with that is you've done nothing for them, right? They want you to do a few things, your spouse, what have you, and you're like, oh, I'm just so tired. Like, I don't want to talk. I just need to be left alone. Because what happens in a state of burnout is your only goal is to try to recharge enough to push yourself back into the setting once again tomorrow. And that's not what we signed up for. So I feel that when a doctor can start to feel into who they are, just to your point, self-awareness, self-love, self-grace, and realize that you cannot leave it all out on the field at the office because the best part of your life, the most important part of your life are those connections at home. And are you being present with your children? Are you listening to them? Are you realizing, like, my girls are getting older. My oldest one will be in college next year. Like, man, that goes fast, Greg. You might have a story with that as well. And I got to tell you, my personal growth journey started in 2018 when I literally face planted in burnout. And I was scared. I didn't know where to go. I didn't even know what it was. And since then, because I've kind of taken on this passion to learn more about who I am, understanding my own emotions, and then starting to look at how mindset, you said the word mindset with your clients, and it sounds like whatever program you have going on there, I already love it because everything you've said so far tells me that you see the human first. And then let's start there if necessary. Yeah, guess what? Strategy and therapy might be the same for a little bit in your business, right? Because you do see a burnt out dentist that's looking for a way out, but in reality, it's all between the ears. And when we can shift the mindset and we can start to invest in ourselves and fill our cup first instead of always pouring it empty for everyone else, now momentum starts to build. Now the hope comes back. Now you start to see yourself as a healer instead of this perfectionistic clinical machine. And those differences make all the difference. So to answer your question, which I don't even know where we started with this, is I like to think of reimagining education, and the Access Endo Impact Academy is that innovation that comes directly from my heart. But I think it sounds like you're a lifelong learner too, Greg. And it's like, to me, the best teachers are that way because they love to learn. And so this is my way of reimagining how I would have loved to have learned dentistry, especially the scary parts like endo. You can master endo as a dentist. There's nothing left that's going to scare you. Let's be honest. It's the scary one. And so we've really tried to take the teeth out of that, quote unquote, and make it a much softer landing spot so that dentists can incorporate this very productive, very lucrative part of their practice where growth can come organically, especially with the DSOs now in prevalence. Organic growth in DSOs, there's no way to do it better than with endo. It's quick, it happens fast, but the key is that you need to have an invested mentor. And the difference between my program and what I see out in the marketplace is that I'm invested in mentoring each and every doctor, And we have a multitude of ways where we can do that on a one-on-one basis so that I can give you the X's and O's of endo. I can show you self-care and try to inspire you to really take care of yourself. But more important than all that is I'm going to be standing here to help you the whole way. And with virtual medium, I'm in your pocket. I'm in your phone. I'm wherever you need me. And I just really, as you can tell, I'm just really excited about the potential of this program helping so many more dentists.
Well, and you bring up such a great point that lifelong learning and that mindset is something that's so critically important to be able to meet the ever evolving challenges in the dental space with the M&A, the way that it's going, and with all of the challenges of an ever evolving marketplace, right? Whether it's the patients in full arch that we work with clients to be able to tackle that challenge, whether it's the independent location or the emerging groups to be able to compete with the larger DSOs, right? To be able to meet that challenge, or in your space, like you're talking about, to be able to meet the challenge of patient care within a DSO system to be able to do the same store sales and the growth organically, which is critically important. If PE money's involved, they want to return on their investment in 3 to 5 years before they recap. I mean, it is such a changing world in dentistry than it was 20 years ago, when you first got involved and graduated, or 18 years ago when I first got involved, or 10 years ago when I got focused in full arch, or even 5 years ago pre-pandemic, or even 2 years ago when money was cheap and it's not anymore. I mean, it is just, it constantly evolves, and it's not so much cyclical. It's like brand new. It's like a new game every 18 to 24 months. And those that are in that lifelong learning mindset tend to have an advantage over others because they know I have to keep learning, right? And it's not so much of, oh, I've got to bog down in the books and study again, because you can't use the same tools before now because it's just so different, right? Well, does telehealth work? I don't know. Have you tried it? Does this platform work? I don't know. Have you tried it, right? And it's constantly learning and building and growing. And one thing that universities teach is how to learn. And so even though like the degrees on the wall and the majors and the minors and everything that I studied with all the degrees, I mean, people say, well, is that really relevant? Well, yeah, international studies, sure it is. Like, look at what you see at conferences, like of all the different people that you meet, right? Do you have a heart? Do you know how to relate? And so I find that fascinating. Anyway, Dr. Brett, here's part of the program. All of my guests play a little something called What the Sleuth is Going On? 3 rapid fire questions. First thing that comes to mind. Are you ready to play?
I'm ready.
All right. Question number 1. What's the worst bad breath you've ever encountered?
Ooh, when or what?
What's the worst bad breath you've ever encountered?
Someone eating an entire clove of garlic before walking into my office.
I love garlic, especially if it's fresh garlic. And if you eat fresh garlic, like for 24 hours later, it just oozes out your pores. That's the good stuff. That's the good stuff. If you drive through like Central California, there's a place where like you drive and you're like, you can literally smell the garlic, right? Because anyway, that's another story for another day. Okay, question number 2. If you could change one thing about your smile, what would it be?
It would probably be my lower incisors are starting to, I was just telling my wife today, they're just starting to tick next to each other. So I've got to tackle this problem quickly because as you age, you lose bone and it happens.
It does happen. Catch it sooner rather than later. All right, I'm with you there. Question number 3. If you could go back and be the inventor of any dental product, and no, you can't choose your own, which one would you choose and why?
I would choose probably Cone Beam because it's literally revolutionized being able to visualize a 3-dimensional object that you're treating. And so absolute game changer. When I was in residency, my mentor, Dr. Tom Dumsha, was traveling occasionally, and he would tell us they're working on some type of 3D imaging where you'd be able to see everything in 3D. And we thought it sounded like science fiction. And that science fiction now is an integral part of every hour of every day in my clinical practice. So Cone Beam would be it.
I just remember seeing I don't remember what company it was, but the 2D and the 3D imaging back like in 2009. right, of a lecture that I sat in. And then I saw that image like on almost every lecture talking about CT scans, right, CBCT. And I'll just never forget that picture. Like that showed up in like 17 different lectures. It must have been
Mind
from
blowing.
like, I bet it was from, I'm trying to think of like the first dental CT company, like, and everybody bought it. And it's, I'm forgetting the
Well,
name of it. Anyway,
Jay Marita truly was a pioneer in developing it. I don't know if that's the one, but
It's
um,
not. It was another one, and I can't think of the name, but I could see him. But anyway, I'll come back to it. Well, Dr. Brett, I want to respect your time and my listening audience. Some people are actually probably running on a treadmill and about to fall over because we like to limit it to 30 minutes. So, is there anything I haven't asked you or anything you'd like to share with my listening audience before we wrap up the show here today?
no, I just want to acknowledge you, Greg. I love what you're doing with Two Sleuth Podcast. I love that, you're focusing on self and reminding people that loving yourself, the relationship you have with yourself, that's from which everything else in life comes. And so I appreciate all the good work you're doing. I love that you had me on. I would love for your listeners to, come listen to On The Cusp podcast and vice versa. We'll send them over your way. And yeah, just grateful for all the good work you're doing. And you mentioned learning and, that learning has changed. And I believe listening to conversations and for you as a podcast host, interacting with so many different people, your knowledge base grows. And the way you described, the space and how it's changing was really just dead on. And so I want to acknowledge you for that. And thank you for having me on. It's been fun to get to know you. And yeah, we'll hopefully connect again soon.
I appreciate the kind words. My guest on the Two Sleuth podcast today has been Dr. Brett Gilbert, not only the founder of the Access Endo Implant Academy, but a professor at UIC and just a great guy all around, and the host of the On the Cusp podcast. Thank you so much, Brett. I appreciate the time today.